Well, I can't go. So annoyed when I realized.
Just close to it.
Okay. Any time, I suppose.
We just asked them to stop. We can start.
Oh,
Okay, everyone. We can start.
okay. Well, hi everyone. A lot of you don't know me. I'm Martin Eddy. I run the Jakarta office of TTW. The aim of this presentation today really is just to give you all a bit of an image of who we are and what we do. To me, I've been running the office there since 1999. To me, we are just as much TTW as you guys are. We do the same sorts of projects. We like to think we do them just as well. Probably not as big in the marketplace as you guys are, but really we're TTW in all ways. Richard was up a couple of years ago, and I was talking to one of the engineers about some drawings on a desk somewhere, and Richard's looked at the drawings and he's gone, oh, actually, those drawings just look just like ours. Which struck me at the time because I wasn't sure whose drawings he thought they might look like, but it kind of underlines the fact that we need to, I guess, make the rest of the company more aware of what we do and who we are. So here's a map of Indonesia. Press the right button. There's Jakarta right there. We've done work from right up in Aceh, right up the tip of Sumatra. Not only tsunami related, we've done a bit of work for Exxon and others up here as well. Right through Sumatra, most of our work's probably in Java. Indonesian Borneo's called Kalimantan. We've done a variety of jobs there. Sulawesi, West Timor and East Timor, Weda Bay nickel mine here in Halmahera in Maluku, and probably the most easterly project we've done is at Freeport gold mine there at Tembagapura. Here's a blow-up of the map around Jakarta. So Greater Jakarta is probably an area a bit like this. Goes around an area about that. Sydney's 6.5 hours flight that way. Perth 4 hours, basically due south of Bali, so slightly east of south. Singapore 900 k's north, and Christmas Island, the nearest part of Australia, closer to Jakarta than Wagga is to here. Bandung was the Dutch capital of the colony of the East Indies prior to World War II. Krakatoa, just over here, which is now a cluster of islands, and one of them still bubbling away and growing. If you went back 400 years, before Jakarta was really in existence as Batavia, so predating Batavia, Banten here was the last stop of the English and Dutch on their way to the Spice Islands. Nutmeg at the time was supposedly the most valuable substance per weight there was more valuable than gold for a period there, and the Dutch and English fought over that for a while, and Barnton here was a sultanate, which was their last stop. And you can still see the Sultan's Palace ruins and the ruins of the Dutch fort there now. So here's a map of Jakarta. Jakarta proper is here. Greater Jakarta, people who would call themselves Jakarta residents live in an area something like this, probably 20 million or so people. Our office is about here. I live not too far away from there. Mudare, who's an associate of the company, lives here somewhere. Uchok, another associate, lives down here. I play cricket a couple of times a month, maybe up here, down here, a few different places around. But yeah, Jakarta residents tend to use the whole city. This is a map of Sydney from the same eye level. I guess you'd say Greater Sydney, St Mary's or so. That sort of distance, like that. So a similar sort of distance, north to south as Sydney is east to west, probably a bit wider in the other direction, but yeah, much higher population density in that space. So I was thinking about what would an iconic skyline of Jakarta look like, just to give you a look. Probably it would have to include this building here, Wisma 46, built in the late 90s, 46 stories to there, I guess. Was the tallest building in Indonesia at the time. It's actually a Dale Stonebreaker facade, just before he joined TTW. And there's a view of Jakarta from the other direction, from the top of Rasuna Tower, one of our projects actually, and there's Wisma 46 again. Another Dale Stonebreaker facade. The Australian Embassy, the old Australian Embassy, just tucked in here behind this. We've done a few projects there. There's Jakarta Bay in the background. The CBD of Jakarta actually extends quite a distance around behind this photograph as well. And here's where it all happens for TTW. Old logo still on the signboard. So this is around probably peak hour of an evening. We're up in the top of this building here. And if we go for a walk just forwards here and then turn right down the lane, then you get a bit of a look at the side of the building that we're in. I'm not sure that it was originally built as an office building, but everyone who's moved in is using it for offices, and we take up 2/3 of the top floor of this building. And there's everyone. We're about 27 people in all. I think there's a couple of people away, but most of them are there. You notice there's quite a few female engineers there as well. And yeah, looking north beyond them with some of Jakarta there in the background. So there's a couple of the engineers and drafters in action. Uchok, Tanman, Wasito, Florentia. Uchok is an associate of TTW. Uchok's a common Batak name. It's actually a nickname for Batak males. Bataks from North Sumatra around Lake Toba. Melinda and Misna having an evening snack in an outdoor warung not too far from the office. One Friday night a month, one Friday night a month or so, we tend to get together for a bit of a kick of futsal on a court nearby. There's the guys wearing TTW uniform, Rifki right in the middle. Mudare is another associate of TTW. He, a couple of times a week, rides his bike to work. 12 k's or so each way. He's got a selection of bikes. I would say that Indonesians love their soccer, but in terms of a participation sport, cycling's probably, road cycling or mountain biking's probably just about the most popular sport there is. a common way for people to get to work is on the back of a motorbike. This is Ryan on the back. You find all over town there are people with their motorbikes just sitting around having a smoke, having a cup of coffee, but if you walk up to them and ask them if you can have a ride somewhere, then they'll be happy to take you there for an agreed fee. So this is how Ryan gets to work. Ryan's a senior engineer. Gojek, this uniform the guy's wearing, it's actually a company that's sprung up in the last year or two. Gojek is a company that's formalised this process, and you get an app on your phone and you can get them to pick up and deliver just about anything that you can think of, and there's so many of them it's more or less instant. Taxis, obviously a common way to get around. The general rule of thumb in Jakarta is blue taxis and black taxis, which are both from the Bluebird group. They're the best taxis. Any other colour, you're more likely to air conditioning not working, you know, cockroaches scuttling around the place. You go blue or black. This is the riding on hitching a ride on the back of a motorbike is called ojek. Very common way to get around. There's an image there that's blocked out, which has, I think, 5 people actually on the motorbike, but a couple of side platforms with more people on that as well. Certainly the 5 people on the motorbike itself is not such an uncommon sight. Buses, that's the commonly what buses look like in Indonesia. Smaller ones, bigger ones down there. Generally hot, crowded, but they get you around. They're also willing to deviate from the normal route to take you where you actually want to go. There's also, more recently, the closest thing to a mass transit system they have at the moment. They've introduced some cleaner buses that do run a fixed route and are quite efficient. It doesn't quite move the number of people needed, and so there's a mass transit rail project. Well, there's several projects in progress at the moment. Bajai, another way to get around. You've probably seen these things. Basically a motorbike engine with a roof on top of it. And there's a guy sitting in the back there in relative comfort. So there's the map of Jakarta again, and I tend to periodically update my Google Earth map with markers of the different projects we do. It's just handy to be able to locate things that you're doing in relation to other things. You can see we've covered the map of Jakarta pretty well. So I'll talk about a couple of the projects that we've done in the last few years now. Gamma Tower is one you might have heard of, which is 64 stories. It's currently the tallest building in Indonesia, but might not be for more than a couple of years. But a couple of features of that. It's relatively slender in the north-south direction, and they found that the wind study found that it's sensitive to crosswind response. So damping has been introduced to help control that. It's also on a raft foundation. Most buildings, especially high-rise buildings in Jakarta, are on quite deep piled foundations. Sometimes 40 metres deep, sometimes more than that. This building's on just a raft. There's a view from level 60. That is the top of the Alimak frame. So to get up to this level, we had to get out at a lower level and then walk up a scaffold on the outside of the building. I'm afraid of heights, so I don't particularly look for opportunities to do that. The apartment towers here, David and I have both lived in those at different times in the past. And back in the 90s, they were among the taller buildings in Jakarta. That's the war cemetery, Dutch war cemetery, which is also where they have the Anzac Day dawn service every year. There's another view from level 60. That's actually Tony Raphael talking to Mare as as Tony does some dynamic measurements on the natural frequency of the building. Down here on the bottom left, that's what the site looked like when we started the project. In the 90s, it was actually, the excavation had started and they'd built half of a raft foundation for a 50-storey building. So our taller building was putting more load on it, more overturning on it. We ended up stiffening it with a grillage of ribs just to increase the depth. And there's some work going on just to break out and cut back to reinforcement that they can splice onto. There's a photograph of the damper. Not sure if you can see that better than I can. So it's a tuned liquid column damper, which is a U shape through there. So basically you've got the given water level about here, and as the building moves, the water's doing that and moving back and forth. One of the challenges, once we were actually designing this steel tank, was that we wanted to have it as a closed system so that you don't lose water to evaporation. Obviously, as the water's doing this at each end, you've got a large volume of air that needs to move back and forth as well. So we had to come up with a duct, and it's basically filling the space in the floor that it's in, with beams coming down and other things that were all in the way. We didn't know the final dimensions of this until well after the structure was built. And so, yeah, we've had to come up with a duct there that can obviously not only allow the air volume to move, we're talking about 30 cubic metres of air or so having to move, the 20 metres every 3.5 seconds or so. And so it not only needs to be able to do it, it needs to be able to do it without sufficient resistance that it affects the period of the damper itself. So getting the mechanical electrical engineers to provide that advice was a new way of looking at that problem for them. Sorry, I'll just go back here. You can see inside here, that's a baffle that hangs down just inside at the bottom of the column. Just in here. There's another sloshing damper in there, which is the rest of the mass you can see. But this is a photo inside. There's a baffle that hangs down. You can see a lattice frame there, which is causing resistance to the water going up and down. And there are ribs along the horizontal surfaces, top and bottom, of the damper there. Astra Honda. This is a wheel casting factory. This was... prior to this factory, all of the motorbikes in Indonesia, and I forget the number, I think they say there's something like 15 million more motorbikes on the road in Jakarta every year. Prior to this factory, they all had steel spoked wheels. This was Honda moving towards plastic cast wheels, which apparently are cheaper to produce, last longer, just better. Now the structure here, up until all of their factories prior to this were basically, they like having vacant space for services and processes underneath. And generally they tend to do beams and precast, but they complained about vibrations and other things. What we did was we just drove the piles and left them sticking out a distance out of the ground, did a flat slab over the top of that. Due to contractors' preference, it ended up being some precast columns, but generally it's a steel truss type structure. You can see precast cladding panels there. But Honda's quite happy with this facility. Apparently, we haven't done another job for them ourselves, but apparently the flat slab's now their normal type of structure. Arcadia Office Park is an office park development that we did when David was still in Jakarta in the 90s. Basically, it was 5 mid-rise office buildings in an open green space with several parking levels down underneath. Its concept was a little unique in Jakarta in that it includes all of that open green space, which is part of the estate. the same owner is now doing a new development just down the road a bit, which is a larger development represented here. This is actually an existing building, and the first TTW office was in the corner of this. That building remains. We've just completed this building, which is Tower 9, and now we're moving on to these other 8 towers. The common podium's going to be about 300 metres by 400 metres. The thinking at present is that we'll try to do the shell of that without separation joints for a variety of reasons. Although we may have separation joints in the suspended levels above that. So there's, just to give you an idea, so this is the one we've just done, 16 stories, a 4,000 square metre floor plate, which is a pretty big floor plate for an office building, and a variety of other heights of buildings there. There's a picture of Tower 9 a couple of months ago. Aeon Mall. Aeon's a large Japanese retailer. This one's 170,000 square metres in East Jakarta. It's a Japanese contractor doing it. They sprung a surprise on us in that they decided to use precast beams for the framing. Now normally that might not seem like such a big deal, but in seismic design where you've got to design your frames to absorb energy in certain ways in a large earthquake, the bigger earthquake than what you've designed for, and precast is a legitimate structure type for that, but it presents new challenges, so we had a bit of a scramble to get on top of that one. IKEA. This is the first IKEA in Indonesia. Around 60,000 square metres over a number of stories. The system, possibly one of the more technically challenging jobs I've ever done, this one. Canberra gave us a bit of assistance with the design at one stage. Rifki could talk you through it. He did a lot of the sequencing and whatnot after that. Obviously IKEA wants exposed high quality concrete floors. Ideally you would do that under the cover of a roof and with a lot of your cladding up. The reason for that is so that you're not exposing it to the sun, the rain and the wind. Now in order to achieve that here, what we had to do was get the columns up, get the beams in, columns up multiple stories. This is about 20-25 metres high with post-tension beams running 16-metre spans in one direction. It needs to be stable with all the cladding on and with some random arrangement of precast hollow core slabs on there as well. And then at the end of all that, you want to be able to cast your bonded toppings with a good level of crack control. But it was all achieved. We're now doing a similar project for a large warehouse, 2 stories, 300 metres by 65 metres, and this one will probably be using precast double Ts. We've also done work for some of the mines in Indonesia. This is a 54-metre spanning conveyor gantry over a haul road. Not long after it was open, they actually, if you can believe it, had an accident where a truck was driving along with its tray up and it actually hit the bridge. But yeah, it did some local damage, but everything's still there. This is all reinforced earth retaining structures. This is a crusher where the trucks come in, they back up and bump into that curb and dump their material in the crusher. And so we did the foundations for this and the pavements around there and the suspended pavement there. We've done a lot of you have probably been to Bali. We've done a few jobs up around Ubud. Nothing actually built yet, although Misa was a villa resort on a canyon of a river there, which got close and may yet still be built. Yeah, but most of our work's been around the south area of Bali, particularly on the limestone bucket. And the last job I'll show you is Samara Uluwatu, up on top of the cliff there overlooking the Indian Ocean. They like to do a lot of earthworks on these sorts of villa projects, quite high retaining walls, all sculpted landscape. And the way we commonly do retaining walls for these is just mortared stone. So they're designed as a mass retaining wall rather than reinforced concrete, which is more expensive. But the thing I'll show you next I'll show you last, is these timber roofs. So you can see timber syrup shingles nailed onto plywood. Now the architect wanted to have this light space between the roof and the top of the wall, and no horizontal structure spanning across. So you've got this problem with this roof that wants to do that, and not much there to stop it. And what we came up with was we've got a reinforced concrete ring beam, just the thickness of the wall running around. These roofs are like, I think the largest was 7 by 9 metres or something. So reinforced concrete ring beam, which essentially works in tension, a concrete stub, reinforced concrete stub on each corner, and using the plywood, we've nailed it to the rafters and the timbers at the bottom and top there, and created a diaphragm that just spans around the corners. That's it. Yep.
Is the damper installed?
They're installing it right now. What you saw there was a mock-up. So they've cut the pieces and they're fabricating it in the shop just to see that it can go together and anticipate the problems. Yeah, but they're putting it up right now.
Yes. Sounds like busy. Are you
Yes.
more profitable than the Sydney guys?
Depends how you measure that. Yeah. Yeah. No, Sydney's the biggest and most important part of the company, I think. But we like to think that we're getting there. Yeah, I didn't mention that. Yeah, you all know. I mentioned Rifki earlier. Rifki a year ago was still working in our office in Jakarta, and he could certainly talk to you about recent experiences there and what it's like. Robertus, I first went to Indonesia in 1994, mid-94, to work on the Kelapa Mall project, and I was a site engineer there. And Robertus, where are you, Robertus?
Was here a bit ago.
Yeah, anyway, Robertus was he was one of the site engineers for the contractor. Anyway, a couple of years later, he came and joined us. I think you'd have to say that sitting at a desk running Rapid wasn't his favourite thing at the time. But anyway. Yes. Yeah, well, in Jakarta, the ground conditions tend to be alluvial clays, so soft-ish, expansive type clay conditions, well, moderately expansive, but the main thing is that, I think I mentioned, most buildings are built on piles. You tend to do board piles anywhere where there's a lot of residential around, just because it's less noisy. More recently, we do a lot of pushed-in jacked piles as well, precast piles. But, the most cost-effective type of piling, of course, is just bashing them in the conventional way. And really, over most of Indonesia, that's the first type of foundations that people think of, but often we find that the ground conditions are good enough for not doing that. And in fact, the Arcadia Office Park, we've done quite a lot of jobs in Jakarta that actually haven't had piles. We've done a lot that have had piles as well. Down the south end of Bali there, I mentioned the limestone. Limestone's an excellent material for a whole lot of reasons. It's got a hard crust on it, but once you break through that, it's soft enough that you can work with it almost by hand, certainly for detailed excavations, but also just using it for fill. It behaves itself really well. You've got low retaining coefficients, easy to compact. So if you get a site that's just limestone, it's quite good material to work in.
Well, when we've got limestone in Canberra, we're worried about the caves down underneath. So how do you know where you've got caves down below?
Yeah, well, we do have a job in that area at the moment we have found a couple of large voids, caves underneath. In fact, they're making features out of them. 2 projects, and they're going to make features out of them in both cases.
Do you want to tell them about our experience at Christmas Island and David and his...
Christmas Island is the location of TTW's first ever reinforced concrete Tyrannosaurus Rex, which David designed. It wasn't only a Tyrannosaurus Rex, it was actually built over the top of a blowhole. So the idea was that every now and then he sprays water everywhere. Unfortunately, probably wasn't quite designed for the pressures and things that were involved, so he moved. I don't think it's still there if you went there now. But we also did some work around the casino there. Apparently the casino was one of the most profitable in the world at the time, just from Indonesians making short trips down there to make use of it.
Basically because Indonesians can't gamble at home.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to gamble at home. It was so close.
What design codes did you design to?
We designed to the Indonesian codes, but in most cases they're closely based on or even translated from the American codes. Seismic's a much bigger deal there. In high-rise buildings, the authorities generally won't even worry about a wind tunnel test unless you're over 50 stories. And this 64-storey one that we did, which was wind sensitive, is a little bit rare as well. There's another one they're designing, 111 stories, and apparently it's not wind sensitive. The wind speeds are low, seismic criteria are high. Yep.
I was just wondering how easy or difficult it is to recruit locally, and do your staff stay generally for a long time, or do they move on?
No, we've got quite good staff retention. It depends on the state of the economy. If you went back 15 years, Indonesia had a long period of very little construction going on, so a lot of people weren't studying engineering. So finding good mid-level engineers is a bit challenging. We tend to... I think the most successful recruiting we do is getting good graduates from the better universities. The guys, they're generally quite keen. I think a couple of them have been doing some work for Melbourne on Casey, and I think Nigel's been pretty happy with their performance on that. They're keen, they're motivated. So, yep.
The winds that you mentioned, is that a seasonal aspect or is it all year round? Talking about the wind sensitive buildings.
There could be... There's only a wet season and a dry season, and there could be a seasonal aspect to it. But really, you don't notice a lot of difference in the wind from season to season. I don't know whether the peaks are seasonal though. Yeah. Sorry? I'm always looking for people over there. We've just recruited another engineer, and I've just interviewed a couple more. So always looking for people. We're considering. Look, if there are people here, there are obviously visa issues we need to look at and work around. But we're always looking for the office. Back in the 90s grew rapidly with a number of people from this office relocating over there for a period. We're starting to see engineers come back here from Indonesia. It'd be good to get some interest in the Jakarta office from the Australian offices as well.
Darren Jeffrey spent quite a while there.
Yep, Darren did. If any of you know Pablo Hedina, former TTW engineer, he was over there, plus one or two others.
Lots of people went there for shorter time.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve Brain's been up there on quite a few shorter trips.
Steve does a lot of civil work up there, doesn't he?
Yeah. In fact, Steve's just I just went and met a client for 140 hectare civil development this week, which Steve's getting his head around at the moment.
Kind of facade projects is it at the moment?
Can I say? Yeah, well, currently we're in the process of winding up our our Singapore office, which is the local facades office. Dale's done a lot of excellent projects, facades projects over the years, knows the market very well. Due to personal reasons, he's left. Currently, he's actually turned out that he's actually still located in Jakarta now. Or he relocated to Jakarta temporarily. I actually talk to him from time to time. But yeah, we're not currently doing any facade work in Jakarta, but we've just recently finished doing the new Australian Embassy. If you look at DCM's website, you see pictures of that. It's quite good looking, quite iconic. He's also done a number of high-rise, 50-storey office and hotel development recently, and a couple of others in Jakarta as well.
Is that sort of the obvious hole in his sort of business contacts? Is he sort of, you can hand off those clients, or is he?
Well, in terms of ourselves, yeah, it's certainly useful to have the facade capability, and how we handle that in moving forwards is something we're still discussing internally. Obviously, we've got our facade group here, and in theory, there's no reason why they can't take on some of that. But you've got to remember that the cost structures there and are different to here. Yeah, we just need to be careful about how we put that sort of thing together. Jobs also often don't quite progress in the manner that you might be used to here as well. They tend to drag out a bit more. Okay. Very good.
Still hungry, but